Forward.
I'm ready.
We're live. So good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Sigma Live podcast. I'm joined this morning with Josh Beasley from Early Upgrade. Nice to meet you, Josh.
Nice to meet you too, and good morning to everybody.
Yeah, and we've got this the strange accent each, haven't we? So a little bit different.
I've been called Australian at least 5 times since I've been here. Not that there's anything wrong with Australians out there, just for the record.
I always think that it's a West Coast thing in the US. If it's East Coast, they pretty much know you're a Brit. But if you're West Coast, then it kind of gets mixed up with Australian, which is not so bad.
It's not bad. I'll take it.
Take it anyway. So what brings you over here, Josh? Tell me a little bit about you and your background in the company.
Certainly. So we're exhibiting at the show. We're a NAID certified organization, and we specialize in end-of-life electronic processing. So think about like used corporate assets, be it a phone, tablet, laptop. We take those goods in, we ensure that they're properly data sanitized, and then we downstream them in accordance with the compliance that we're held to. As a business, we've been around for 17 years.
Oh, wow.
I joined the company 2 years ago, initially as a board member, and then I stepped into the CEO position in April last year. So I work alongside the co-founders who've been in the business for the duration of its history, which is always fun because, you're coming into somebody else's house and changing things up, but it's been a really, really, really good couple of years.
It sounds like they're really comfortable of you coming in, though, coming from the board. So they must have, did they see and think that, hey, this is the right person to take it to the next level now?
Well, I come from a slightly different side of the industry. So I've always worked in device protection, so like your insurance and warranty. I've worked in trading, so run large trading programs for OEMs, retailers, carriers. So I come in with a very different view. And when I first came in, like the first time we sat down and started talking about things, I thought, wow, I'm going to have an extremely different viewpoint on how things should be done, how we should operate. But we jam really well together. Because if you look at myself and the 3 co-founders of the business, we all have very different backgrounds. So if you look at like myself, as I said, I come from trading services. Simon's mainly on the devices side. Okay. Rodell specialized in accessories. And Michael, again, has got like a device-focused background. So having all those different perspectives in the room is helpful, because I think sometimes in this space you can get too focused on the niche, or niche, as people say over here, the niche. Whereas, we need that diversity in thinking to really drive things forward.
Yeah, I find that really interesting as well, because very often if people grow up within the industry, they'll just kind of do what they've always done. But if you come in from a different industry, you start to bring in different ideas.
Well, my big thing in this industry, and it's hard to say it at a conference where you're surrounded by people focused on shredding, but for me, we should be focused on wipe first. So data erasure above all else. Because with that, you're maintaining not only data security, which is priority number 1 for all of us, but the functional integrity of a device, which can then be redeployed, or you can part it out and reuse the useful components. And I think we're all aware of component shortages now that we're experiencing globally. We have a never-ending source of raw materials in the devices that we're pushing to end of life. So I'm very focused on not only ensuring that data security is priority number 1, but ensuring that our focus as an industry is really on sustainability and keeping assets in circulation for longer.
I think that's really important, because I come from medical device was the last part, and we used to destroy devices that had maybe they got wet shipment. And so we didn't want those to make it into the supply chain. And we literally crushed them. And it used to make me cry, seeing all these skips and dumpsters full of all these crushed up parts. And the recovery was harder then, because we damaged circuit boards. I mean, they got crushed. They could not be reused. And since then, we did a lot of work to correct that. We stopped crushing them and things. But a lot of people don't. That's still their go-to model.
And that's something that we're working on to try and really educate people. And it's not really in the ITAD domain. That's one area where we need to educate folks, but it's upstream. It's at the Fortune 500s, the enterprises who have a natural tendency to say this asset must be destroyed. Right. Because the perception is that destruction is the most secure means of downstreaming that asset. Whereas in reality, that's hinged entirely on the destruction method that's been used. And there's an image that I often show to folks in our team. So we received an iPad from a destruction company. This is probably 6 months ago. And it had been drilled. It had been drilled straight through the middle. It was an iPad 6. So the destruction company had drilled through the screen, through the battery, a live battery, so pretty dangerous, and through the rear housing. But they'd completely missed the circuit board in doing it. And that was classed as a secure destruction method for their enterprise partner. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at the ITAD. It's just an education piece that we all need to get familiar with. So if you're pushing products into that domain because you think destruction is the only way or the most secure way, there are other options out there that don't only aid the secure practices that we're trying to, uphold in this arena, but also allows you to get more recovery from these items that you're downstreaming.
Yeah. How do you educate people? Because I find this fascinating because I was kind of, I'll use the word forced. Are you allowed to do the air quotes nowadays? But, because we had compliance and quality teams, and they'd written up these reams of instructions that you had to follow, and on there it was destroy. It wasn't, recycle and this, it was destroy. And so that was it. And they went, and if you didn't do that, you're in trouble. So how do you educate upstream to get people to change these kind of documented processes that are embedded and probably got a horrible procedure, a procedure to change a procedure effectively?
It's tough, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you back to one of our co-founders at Early Upgrade, Michael. So when we were first talking about this very challenge, he said, have you ever been to a large industrial shred company where all day all they're doing is shredding devices? I said, well, yeah. And we talked through the process. So typically you'll have like a Gaylord or a box of devices. They tip it onto a conveyor belt and it's fed into a shredder.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I'm going to pull my phone out just for this example.
Yep.
He went, how do you know that this phone was in that Gaylord? How do you know it made it onto that shredder? And how do you know that it made it from the shredder made it from the conveyor into the shredder?
Yeah.
I said, well, I don't. I'm just trusting that it was in the box. And there's a huge information gap right there.
Yeah.
And that's a huge position of trust. And then on the back end, some people are shredding down to dust. Others are shredding down to 2 mil. I dare say there's others shredding out to, a bigger form factor. And the chips in these devices are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah. And the data's there.
So you've got huge reliability gaps in that process unless you're really auditing it properly. So when it comes to educating our customer base, we show them the benefits of data erasure. So we work with Blanco, PhoneCheck, FutureDial, all those guys.
Yeah.
And we show them how everything is done on a one-for-one basis. And when you're wiping something, you typically wipe the device and then you run it through a validation process afterwards. So you've got a stopgap there. So you're not only trusting the data erasure itself, you're then validating that device is free of data on a one-for-one basis. So you compare the reliability of that to tipping a Gaylord of devices onto a conveyor and trusting that they're being shredded. There's a huge gulf in terms of a security gap in that first method, whereas on the second one, there's more reliability.
Yeah.
Secondly, on the back end, if you're shredding something, many companies are charging to shred that material. Whereas if you look at what you do with a data erasure, you're actually paying that customer post-process and saying, hey, this device, it's worth $200. Here you go. So there's a huge financial incentive to wipe as well. But again, we're not going to educate people overnight. People are very set in their ways. You hear the word destruction and you automatically think secure. But there are some pitfalls in that as we see it today.
Yeah. They've got to get into their workflow now. I apologize because I can't remember who I was chatting to about this yesterday on a podcast. But, I remember in the company and my laptop wasn't working or it was due for an upgrade. I go into the IT room. There's a stack of laptops up to the ceiling. They give me a new box. They take that one, they throw it on top.
Yep.
And unless that's really flowing, the problem is suddenly they look at that. Now it's a huge cost to do something with it. They take the cheapest option, which is probably, just destroy them. Not really realizing that may not be the cheapest option.
And that's where I say that the education piece is huge because you're talking about data security and you're talking about residual recovery. And quite often those two topics aren't commingled with the person you're dealing with. Because like if you're dealing with the IT manager, all they're thinking about is data security.
Yeah.
If you speak to the CFO, they're thinking about, hold on, this is an asset that's been written off. I can get a nice ad back in here for the P&L. So you've got to work with multiple stakeholders. And like I say, it's definitely not a sprint to get people over the line with it. There's a big education piece that affects multiple stakeholders in an organization. Yeah,
and getting the sustainability people engaged. Although those roles keep changing, sometimes they seem to be really important within a company. Then they seem to get pushed to the back, I guess, depending on the news cycles or what's going on.
It's becoming more important though. And if you look at like a phone, for example, the average smartphone contributes 100 kilograms of CO2 equivalent in its lifetime. which is huge.
100 kilograms. Yeah.
Huge. And if you look at like the water consumption involved to make one of these things, and obviously the labor's another thing, but freight, like there's so much that goes into it. And at the end of the day, if all we're doing is throwing it in a shredder when we're done with it, we're missing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, destruction absolutely has a place in the value chain, but it should come later. For me, destruction should be when a device is unrecoverable, or if it's not viable to run it through like an erasure process. But for me, it should be like a waterfall. You bring a product back, you try and wipe it, you can't wipe it, you destroy it.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, in some cases, we're bypassing that midsection and we're going, bring a device in, destroy it.
Yeah.
And like I say, everyone has a role to play, but it's just about finding that happy medium.
Yeah. Can I go back to something you said earlier? Because I kind of always said to me, which was that chain of custody, you know. And so when you threw something, you know, out of the Gaylord onto the conveyor and you lose track of it, how do you track everything? You know, if you're going through the erasure process and all, do you use the serial number on the devices? How do you actually do that?
If something can go through the erasure process, your diagnostic provider is pulling the serial numbers from the internals within the device. So you plug it in and it's pulling that serial, so you can rely on that data. It, again, isn't somebody manual inputting a really long number. This has been pulled from within the unit. So you've got a higher reliability there. Whereas going back to like the shred example, sometimes people are tipping on a Gaylord and saying, right, there's 1,000 pounds of mobile phone weight in that Gaylord. We've just tipped them on there and they've all gone through the shredder. There's no specificacy around it. I think that's the right word. Big word.
Too big for me.
But yeah, it's a lot more specific when you run it through one of those diagnostic procedures.
Yeah. And because you're able to, I'll use the word recycle, put them back into use again. I mean, it changes the value proposition ultimately for the customer. I mean, I think about, an organization with 10,000 employees. Pretty much probably 70% of those are issued with laptops.
Yep.
How much money one can get turned back to the customer, but then those laptops being reused again, how much are you saving elsewhere?
I'll give you a real life example. I don't like to really talk commercials on these things, but I think it's an important one to give. So Chromebooks.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Typically, like
use them for the schools a lot.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
If you look at like education, typically when a Chromebook reaches the end of its life, a company's coming in and they're buying those Chromebooks by the pound. And a Chromebook's a good example to use because most people pay $1 a pound.
Okay.
So that Chromebook's coming back for $1 a pound. If you put that Chromebook through a wipe and diagnostic process, you might sell it for $25 at a piece level. It's a huge gulf.
It's a huge gulf, isn't it? So people are leaving a lot of money on the table with destruction rather than taking this approach.
100%.
Yeah.
And the tendency is to believe that there's no value in this used equipment because it's older, it's legacy, there's new generation product out. But there are many use cases for that type of product to remain in deployment. And that's across phones, tablets, laptops, wearables, desktops, you name it, you can find a use for it.
Yeah. So when you're working with other operators, are you, and I apologize for the ignorance, are you selling them the equipment, the processes, the systems? How do you work with, if I was setting up, or if I was in the destruction industry now, and I said, hey, Josh, help me with this, what does that look like?
So we manage all of the above. So we are R2 certified, we're NAID certified, we have multiple ISOs. We would say to you, let us take in what you have. We'll guarantee you a fixed rate for that product. So that's going to be the low end. On a low end, we'll guarantee you this no matter what. But we then have a rev share structure where we say post-appraisal and post-sale, we're going to show you what we received for that product. And then we'll have a rev share on it. So everyone's winning. We make enough on our process based on what we attain on the sell-through. Why not share it with someone else? So we're trying to bring process and transparency to the overall industry, which, hate to put it in this way, but it's an industry that relies a lot on smoke and mirrors. And we want to bring that transparency and everything to the table so people benefit from data security strengthening and benefit from a higher commercial gain on the asset.
Yeah, and back to what we said earlier, or you said earlier, is it is a process. It's an education process to get people. So it sounds like an operator today could continue doing what they're doing, start to offer this if they're not doing this as an extra service. And over time, try to bring more and more of their customers over by saying, yeah, sure, I can destroy it, but have you thought about this? And then that education, process kind of works for them.
Absolutely. And that's where we've come in for a lot of partners who we work with in this space who originated from paper shredding. So paper shredders are getting into IT equipment, and we're going in and saying, let us be your partner for IT assets. And we'll come in, and any questions your customers got, we can help you answer. If they need specific reporting, we can produce it for them. If they need individual certificates of destruction or data erasure, we can provide them for them. Again, so it's a step-by-step education.
And I like that a lot, because you don't have to give up what you know, but you can work with a partner who brings that expertise and start to then stretch out into a more broader, diverse offering.
Well, it's such an important role in the value chain, because again, if you look at these precious metals within devices and the useful life of a device kind of going back upstream, we need these products to last longer. It's not sustainable for us to keep consuming the way we do. So there's a need for it. And again, if we can lend our specialism to someone else who's got access to devices, then great. And using the example of paper shredders, these guys are going around all day collecting documents from enterprise clients. Every single one of those enterprise clients have got devices that they're using that are eventually going to reach end of life. So it's a really nice cross-sell service for someone to lean into.
Yeah, very, very good. Josh, I always like to leave with a difficult question. This is how I like to finish up. For you, I don't know if this is difficult, awkward, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Manchester United or Manchester City?
I'm glad this mic's got a red cover on it, or I wouldn't have been doing the podcast.
Great answer, great answer. For anybody out there who doesn't understand that, it's Manchester United.
Round ball football, the original one.
The original one. Josh, I really appreciate you taking the time to educate me. I didn't know all of this. I've been away for a while now, so it's really interesting to see how ITAD has changed over the years. It was a term that was coming in maybe a little bit more 13 years ago, but now it's really come to fruition, and the way that you're approaching it, especially with the sustainability part, I think is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I think, and this is an interesting point for me, like the word disposition and what it implies. Because when you hear disposition, like your tendency goes to end of life.
Yeah.
But really our role as ITADs is to be the life cycle manager for these devices, not to push things through to that end of life criteria that we often find ourselves in. So, yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity in this space. I'm delighted to be part of it. And, yeah, thank you for having me.
No worries. And so people can find you here at the show, on the show floor, and come along and learn a little bit more about it. And for the people who couldn't make it to the show and are either watching this podcast live or will follow up with it online, how would they get hold of you?
So we're here at the show. We have a booth. Monica, one of my colleagues, is here with me. She'll be here for the full 2 days of the show. Otherwise, reach out to us on LinkedIn. Feel free to contact us via the company website, earlyupgrade.com, and we can go from there.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Josh. Thanks again, and enjoy the show. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.